She almost laughed out loud at her own stupidity. The jar did look intact from a distance, but now that Marc had come closer, she could see the cracks from where it had been broken. Marc had obviously glued the pieces together as best he could. Lisa was just a little confused about why he'd bothered. Okay, so the jar was old, and maybe it had even been valuable, but now it was so ruined it probably wasn't worth anything. "I thought you'd like to see this," Marc said. "It's rather interesting. I was just about to throw away the pieces when I discovered letters on some of them. I was curious, so I actually glued the pieces together to find out what it said. Look at this." Lisa did not want to look at the jar. She had a bad feeling about it. But Marc practically shoved the jar in her face, so there was no way of avoiding it. Reluctantly, she glanced at it. She reached out and let her index finger trace the uneven letters. "Woe the one who breaks the snail." That made no sense. Didn't they mean seal? "Woe the one who breaks the seal and lets the evil out." Lisa was suddenly cold all over. The fine hairs at the nape of her neck stood straight up. She remembered the eerie, yellow-grayish fog that had emerged from the broken jar. Had she let something evil out? She glanced quickly over her shoulder, expecting some scary monster right behind her, ready to attack. But no monster lurked there. Everything was quiet and peaceful in the stable. Marc saw her reaction. He put his hand on her arm in a comforting gesture and smiled at her. "You don't take this seriously, do you?" he asked. "I mean, you don't think for a minute that there really was something evil inside the jar?" Lisa shook her head. "No, I don't, or maybe I do. I really don't know," she stammered. "I don't want to believe it, but you weren't there yesterday. You didn't see it. An eerie cloud came right out of the jar. I thought it was going to suffocate me, and then afterwards—" Lisa's words trailed away. She hadn't told anyone, not even Karen, about the scary shadow she thought she had seen just before she fainted. She didn't want to talk about it, or even think about it. It was just too weird. Marc's light-hearted tone turned serious. He looked at Lisa with a worried expression. "I've really scared you," he said. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." He paused for a minute and then said, "I'll take the jar with me and throw it in the garbage so you won't have to see it ever again." "No!" Lisa screamed. "Please don't throw it away! Please!" She didn't know why she was reacting so strongly. "I don't want to look at it again, but please don't throw it away. Promise me." Marc looked totally confused. "But I thought you'd prefer—" "Okay, I won't throw it away, I promise." He left the stable, carrying the jar with him. Lisa turned back to Tinto and put her hand on his neck. Marc probably thought she was totally nuts, but let him think whatever he liked. She couldn't explain this, even to herself, let alone Marc. But she felt with every ounce of her body that throwing away the jar would be a big mistake. What if it was something important? She had no idea what it could be. She just knew, without a trace of doubt, that she was right. "Oh, this is great. Now I'm beginning to feel like my old self again." Lisa smiled and leaned forward to pat Tinto's neck. "Who were you earlier then, Mickey Mouse?" "Silly," Lisa laughed and stuck out her tongue at Karen. "You know perfectly well what I mean." Karen nodded. Raven tossed his beautiful dark brown head as if he agreed with whatever they said. Raven was a Swedish half-blood horse. Normally he was as docile as a lamb, but now and then, if he was in a bad mood, he could really act up and be more stubborn than a mule. Today, luckily, he was more lamb than mule. The two girls set out on a long ride across the countryside. At first Lisa was jumpy. She more than half expected something scary to happen. But as time went by and nothing did, she began to relax. The weather was beautiful, the horses were eager and alert, As they rode through open fields, the only sounds were the soft thuds of horses' hooves and the girls' voices. Lisa told Karen about her reaction when Marc showed her the jar. When I went into complete hysterics and begged him not to throw the jar away, he must have thought I'd totally flipped. Maybe you think so too. Lisa gave her friend a long, searching look, but Karen just shook her head. "No, I don't think you're crazy at all," she said. "You're a reasonable person who isn't easily frightened, and I've never seen you in the state you were in yesterday. I don't know what it was that scared you so much. Marc obviously thinks it's nothing, but it seems to me like it was more than just your imagination, that's for sure." Lisa sank into her saddle with relief. She had been afraid that Karen had only gone along with what she'd said the day before to make her feel better, because she was acting so strangely. "Look, there's Marc," said Karen, pointing, as they approached the riding stables. "He's setting up jumps on the riding course. I bet he's going to practice with Adani. Let's take our horses to the stable and then we can watch him." "Good idea. I just love watching Adani soar over the jumps like they're no big deal. He's a wonderful jumper. I sometimes wonder if he has wings hidden somewhere on his body." Karen giggled. "Maybe he's Pegasus in disguise." "No, he's the wrong color. Pegasus was white, wasn't he?" "I have no idea." Lisa shrugged and led Tinto into the stable. She was glad he was still in his old stall. In a few days he would move to the renovated stable next door. Lisa wasn't sure she liked the idea anymore. The old stable had seemed so cozy and inviting before she found the jar, but now just thinking about it gave her the creeps. "Look at Adani," Karen exclaimed. "I've never seen him this dressed before." Lisa and Karen sat on a bench close to the riding ring so they could watch Marc doing his warm-up routines on Adani. He rode the horse a couple of times around the ring. Normally, Adani was a quiet and well-behaved horse, but today something was very wrong. The horse sidestepped nervously, tossed his head and rolled his eyes. He even reared a couple of times. Marc had to struggle to keep him under control. "He seems totally out of his mind." "Maybe something under the saddle is bothering him," Lisa called out to Marc, but he obviously had the same thought himself, because he abruptly halted and slid down from the saddle. "There's nothing wrong with the saddle," he said, puzzled. "I just don't understand what's bugging Adani. I'll mount him and try again. If he keeps playing up like this, I can forget about getting any useful training done today." He swung into the saddle and collected the reins. All of a sudden, Adani acted like his calm old self again. Marc started to relax. I guess something must have been wrong with the saddle after all," he said. "Everything seems to be perfectly okay now." Lisa and Karen went back to the bench and sat down. They watched Marc take the horse a full circle around the entire ring before steering him towards the first jump. Adani floated over in his usual elegant way. The next jump also went like a dream. But then, straight out of the blue, Adani acted like someone had stuck a sharp needle into his body. He was approaching a parallel jump when suddenly he shied and bucked like a rodeo horse. The unexpected maneuver took Marc completely by surprise. He was thrown out of the saddle and hit the ground with a heavy thud. For a minute, Marc lay there without moving. Then slowly he sat up, with a somewhat dazed expression on his face. Adani had come to an abrupt halt a few yards away. Now he slowly turned and looked at his owner. Lisa felt a jolt of fear when she saw Adani's eyes. From a distance she could see the hatred burning in them. His ears lay flat against his head, and there was froth in the corners of his mouth. There was no doubt he was ready to attack. Marc moved, but before he had time to get up, the huge horse rose up on his hind legs, ready to strike. For a couple of seconds that felt like an eternity, the horse held his position. He looked like a fantastic, frightening statue. Then he lashed out, deadly hooves flying towards his owner, who lay helpless on the ground.